Hello, Renegade Marketers. Welcome to Renegade Marketers Unite, the top-rated podcast for B2B CMOs and other marketing-obsessed individuals. You're about to listen to a recording of Renegade Marketers Live, our live show featuring the CMOs of CMO Huddles, a community that's sharing, caring, and daring each other to greatness every day of the week. This time, we've got a conversation with Mandy Dhaliwal, who is now the CMO at Nutanix. She was at Boomi at the time of this interview, Bhaskar Roy of Workato, and Julie Kaplan of CareMetx. We explored the role that each CMO plays in developing their respective companies' cultures and bringing them to life. One thing to note, as it goes sometimes in a live show, we did lose Mandy's audio at the end. So unfortunately, we didn't get her final words of wisdom, but we did record a Tuesday tip after the fact with her, which we'll link in the show notes for this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you do, hit me up on LinkedIn or hit our guests up on LinkedIn and let them know how much you enjoyed it. Okay, let's dive in. I'm your host, Drew Neiser, live from my home studio in New York City. In a recent huddle, one CMO turned to his peers and said, "We've been winning business lately because of our culture." It was a mic drop moment as all eyes turned to this CMO for an explanation. He went on to explain that the new customer saw a complete alignment of cultures, and with all other things being equal, tie went to the culture fit. Now imagine that, not features, not functions, not price, culture. That of course raised all sorts of other questions like what role can and should marketing play in building culture? And how do you build culture without an office? And where does wellness fit into all of this? All questions we want to grapple with and wrestle to the ground on today's show. To do that, we have three amazing CMOs who are ready to, as we say at CMO Huddles, share, care, and dare each other to greatness. With that, let's bring on Mandy Dhaliwal, CMO of Boomi and star of episode 4 of this show and episode 178 of Renegade Marketers Unite. Hello, Mandy. Welcome back.
Thanks, Drew. Great to see you.
So how are you?
Doing great. Sunny California.
Oh, there you are. So let's talk culture first. I mean, can you describe Boomi's culture?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we talk about a lot these days, in particular, as we're growing and as we're adding people to our team in a virtual world. Boomi historically, as it's grown up through the years as a startup and now into, an enterprise company, we've also always been very entrepreneurial and very people focused. And that extends beyond us. We're more than Boomi badge wearers. Our culture now permeates our partners and our customer base. So that mic drop moment resonates with me completely. I love that CMO said that.
I'm imagining, has that experience had happened to you?
Absolutely, it has. And I wanted to show you something that we do as far as culture. Right, our values here, and I don't know if you guys can see this on the screen. I kind of just brought a prop because I'm a marketer. Play for each other, build trust, own it, create awesome things, and go beyond. Our customers see this with us, particularly members of our advisory board, our partners that work very closely with us as well, that drive our go-to-market. We've had customers on stage with us at our user conference that really believe they're part of the Boomi family. So that to me is a massive win.
Let's go through those again.
Play for each other.
Okay.
Build trust, own it, create awesome things, and go beyond.
So the first thing that I notice is, it's pretty simple, as we say in the show. There's not a lot of hype. There's not a lot of adjectives, and it feels very personal. Are there any in those that are harder in your mind for people to sort of wrap their brain around and execute against than others?
I think the bar is set very high with create awesome things. So as a tech company, right, we tend to want to add the best possible, the latest and greatest whiz bang stuff. So I think that one sometimes we over index on, but beyond that, this was a team exercise that we did across the company during the pandemic to really start to codify our values. So this was something that was built through the masses and also checked in with our customers and partners that are very close to us. So, it passed the resonance test and the authenticity test.
I'm going to focus on create awesome things because there's a lot going on there. We've got create. And I wonder, so are there roles in the company, like say customer support, where they go, okay, well, maybe I'm creating awesome experiences, because often, folks will feel left out because they're not in marketing where they can create things. They're not in product where they can create things. How do you take one like that and make sure it feels like it applies to everybody?
Well, again, it's more about the inclusivity, right? We all have a role to play. And so when you're on the front lines talking to customers or prospects, if you get feedback, it's incumbent upon you to be able to go share that with the folks that are building the product or that are building the marketing campaign. Hey, we didn't like that word, or, maybe we should do it this way. We got some feedback here. So it's more about really having that conversation and relaying back to create that awesome thing that is Boomi.
Did these exist pre-pandemic?
They did, but not in a codified way.
And so why was it so important to bring these out during the pandemic?
We're all sitting, obviously, the executive team, we're not on planes, trains, automobiles anymore. We have the cycles. So that was the silver lining as a part of the pandemic. And also, as we were bringing people on in a remote culture, how do you convey what culture is when people can't be together in person? That was the problem that we were solving. And we also knew we had tremendous growth objectives and growth targets and, new people joining on a regular cadence. So how do you start to give them a sense of belonging quickly? And that's where it started from.
Yeah. And I'm curious, so what was the process that you went, because again, these are so carefully chosen words, and how involved with you are, and who else was sort of key into sort of bringing these values through the organization, finding them, and then obviously communicating them. But let's just talk about the process of finding them.
Sure. So it was a very democratic process, if you will. We had folks across the company being able to go in and vote and also go create some of these values in terms of what we stood for. We had healthy conversations cross-functionally, as well as we stood up a team of folks within the company that were cross-functional that became the champions of this. The leadership team didn't build this. This was truly built pan-Boomi, pan-global as well. So that was really important. So everyone's voices were heard and felt like they had an opportunity to contribute.
Wow. I mean, that's giving a lot of trust to employees.
It's our culture.
Were there any moment that, because this is a moment where if you're a CEO or a CMO and you're going, are they going to get the words right? I mean, are they going to know? And at what point did you was there points where you had to sort of intervene and say, no, we could do this better?
It was actually the reverse. I'm like, I never thought of that. That's amazing. Right. And so again, right, not all creativity happens in marketing.
No. Interesting. So, and this gets to this question of building culture without, one of the ways of building culture is to get your employees involved in defining it. Yep. Right. I mean, I think that's the light bulb moment here, folks. If you're paying attention at home, write this down. Think about your values. Usually they're like, a bunch of people in a room, executive committee gets together and say, these are the values of the organization. This is what's important to me. Here, you did it completely the opposite. Went to the employees and said, what's important to you?
Right.
What's it mean to work? And I'm wondering, how did they trigger the process? I mean, how did they get to where they got to?
So we had this team of champions that were very passionate. Right. And we also tapped into some of our ERGs as well. And we hand chose some folks that we knew could really take this and be able to carry it over the line, if you will. So I think that's really important. If you're embarking upon this exercise, it has to have strong executive sponsorship as well. That's really important. But really choose your folks carefully that are going to lead this thing and be your ambassadors. And then listen well.
Right. So executive sponsors is important. We got that. We have to have the right people on the committee, but it doesn't have to be the leadership team. We can push it down. ERGs keep coming up in huddles all the time. They came up was it on Monday when we did a bonus huddle? But for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what an ERG is.
Yeah, employee resource groups. So setting up basically focus areas for folks that are passionate about certain things. I, surprise, lead the Women ERG, co-lead it with one of our leaders in APJ. And so we get folks together to talk about issues that are important to us and also bring material to them that would be of relevance to them as far as career, as far as balancing life, you name it, right? The topics that people get to vote on. And so we do that across young entrepreneurs. We do it across people, diversity, there's many different groups. Veterans is another one that's a really big one for us. So looking across your population of your employee base and having people connect with what resonates with them is really important for having that healthy conversation and also getting to know their peers across the company that they wouldn't otherwise interact with.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to now talk to Bhaskar Roy, who is the CMO of Workato. So Bhaskar, how are you?
I'm doing great. And, just like Mandy was saying that, I'm also from sunny California. So the weather here is just awesome.
Well, hey, it's warm here in New York. I just want you to know. So Workato seems like a textbook fast growth software company. And since work is in the company, I can't help but wonder how this impacts the culture. Talk a little bit about the culture.
That's a great question. And, the other part of the name stands for automation. So Workato stands for work automation. So it actually works really well for a culture, mainly because we look at, what a name exemplifies, which is about how we can automate various processes, the mundane, and various aspects of what we do so that we can do higher order work together. And, that has become a big part of a culture, which is a part of the name itself, doing things that we all love doing. The other thing I would like to say is the work aspect. We actually love working with each other. So that we don't see as a negative. I'll give you an idea, right? Just to go to the history a little bit. We all, at least a bunch of folks, the initial 20, 30 people in the company, we worked together before Workato. It was at other companies and we did another startup together. So we loved hanging out with each other as well as work with each other. And that has permeated throughout the organization. So we don't see work as work. We see mainly work as a place where we get together to do amazing things and have fun. And for folks who are in California or especially the Bay Area would have seen our, say, billboards, which are there, where we talk about the headline being the automate the work out of everything. And the work, WO, is a star, which is, don't think this as a bad thing, right? In this sense, calling that out very clearly. So yeah, so we like work, we like having fun with each other. And the name, it stands for work automation.
Interesting. And that, one could think about the name as, oh, we're automating work. But what you're saying is we're really taking some of the hard stuff out so that you can have more fun, I think is sort of what you're doing. And you've been there 7 years. And so first of all, having this core group of folks that have been part of it for so long must have been, just as I'm thinking about it, hugely helpful during the pandemic, right? Because you already had these strong relationships. I always feel really badly for these startup companies who are adding, 30, 40 employees during the pandemic or more, and they haven't physically met any of them, and how hard that is. Anyway, obviously the company has to mature from when you got there. Talk a little bit about how the culture has evolved. I mean, work has always been fun, but things evolve. They have to as you get bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things early on, and this mainly is a fact that, we all have been working together. We had a way that we loved working with each other and together. So during pandemic, very similar to what Mandy was talking about, we codified it. And we created, what is the operating values, and we call it the Workato way. Another reason to do that is because we have been scaling, like you talked about, very rapidly. Just to give you an idea, during the past couple of years, the pandemic years, our employee size has quadrupled. So we have not met most of the folks, overall in person. So codifying this in a way where people can understand, and then as we scale, we can keep the culture was a very important part of this. And I'll give you some ideas as to, or some examples as to how things carried over from the time when we were really small to what we are now. So for example, one of the key things that we all did from day one is we obsessed about our customer, right? Each and every one of us was working, including me, taking customer success calls, customer support calls, working very closely with them in order to make sure that, we are grounded in what our customers want and what the reality is. How that has translated today is we call this, in our operating values, we call this customer is a North Star. And the way it has translated is even in marketing team, everyone is supposed to be listening to sales calls every week. Everyone is being to talk to customers every week. have that relationship, understand what the customers are. So what we are doing from a marketing standpoint is grounded in reality rather than ivory tower marketing. Our head of product does not hesitate to put engineers in front of customers, mainly because he truly believes that that builds empathy, as a result, better product, better software. So those are some of the things that as we have grown, we have morphed a bit, but we have kept the core values to be the same. And similarly, I have a bunch of examples. I can go for a while. The other key thing that comes out is we are in a massive market opportunity, right? In the sense, however you cut it, people talk about being hundreds of billions of dollars. And so when we looked at that back in the early days, we realized that, hey, we cannot tackle this alone. There's just no way that big a market we can go and try to capture that alone. So we built this core aspect of what we looked for when we hired and as we built the company was we need company builders with us. And that's a core value. We are all company builders. These are folks who are not employees, but with us to help build our company and take it forward, mainly because we know that we won't have all the answers. We are out to capture a big market and we cannot do that by ourselves. So we had to define that. We understood that back then, but come in the past couple of years, we have to define it, saying that this is what we call company builder, and this is how we are going to look for it, et cetera, et cetera.
So I got customer obsession, and I just did any marketer listening, and we talk a lot about this in huddles, the importance of having customer advisory boards, the importance of going on sales calls or listening to the gong calls. But what's interesting to me, and then you add this layer of company builder. And I hadn't really thought that the way you're going to have to build culture in a virtual world is you have to rethink them and you have to put them out there in a way that's going to matter to the virtual world of employees where you might not be face to face. So my sort of last question before we go on to Julie is, knowing how important and how hard, look, you went 4X in terms of employees, and I'm sure that was in marketing department across everywhere. So many remits to the of CMOs is drive demand. That's the number one remit. And I'm thinking of the CMOs who are listening to this show. They're saying, yeah, this is nice. It's culture. It's wellness. These are nice, friendly topics for a Thursday afternoon. And they're only rewarded. This is the thing I see is they're only rewarded for driving demand. And so where does culture and the role of the CMO play in this and fit into your overall responsibilities?
I think it is. It's a core part and very intertwined with everything we do. I don't see that as separate, to be honest. So I'll give some examples. One of the key things that we talk about is, and very openly, right from onboarding, etc., is culture is not the responsibility of just the leadership team. It's not. It's everyone's responsibility. How we keep it, how we maintain it, it's everyone's responsibility. And so it's a shared responsibility that makes it easier for me, mainly because people then trust each other around that. They know that we'll operate around that particular part. And so if things go astray a bit, I don't have to take action most of the time, others do, because they see this as a shared responsibility. So it helps quite a bit in terms of how we do things. Plus, as a part of the culture as well, it kind of defines as to where we go to market. Because one of the things that we talk about on our culture, a couple of elements is get 1% better every day. That's a part of our culture. So how do you do that? It's by what you're learning. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, learn. But then what you learn, share with everyone else so that others can get 1% better every day. So there are some of these things which are so good, so much ingrained into everyone that, it kind of makes it easy. I won't say easy, but it makes it easier in terms of how do we go about it and how do we drive demand. Similarly, another aspect of a culture is, hey, don't accept status quo. If someone else is doing this, doesn't mean we have to do that. So those elements, so we look at experimentation from a demand gen standpoint very, very differently than what other companies, other B2B companies will do.
Got it. Okay. It's inseparable. You know that. I know that. Not every CEO knows that, but that's okay because you're one of the founders. So you have a very special, I'm sure, relationship with your CEO. All right. We're going to keep moving. I want to bring on Julie Kaplan right now. Julie, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Now, you've been at CareMetx for more than a year now in an entirely virtual capacity, which is a little bit different than Mandy and Bhaskar. So how did you come to understand the company culture? What was their acculturation process?
Well, like many other companies, CareMetx has a thoughtful onboarding process, which includes an introduction to the culture and what it means in terms of behaviors, practices, and tools. What's especially nice about CareMetx is that our values, to a certain degree, are built right into our name. The word care represents the compassion we bring to the patient experience. While we are a technology forward company, our solutions are ultimately about helping people. And the word MEDX was coined by combining metrics with TX, which is short for therapy and for transactions. And this word mashup represents our ability to speed up patient access to therapy with transactional technology and data-driven processes. Our values are then reinforced by the name of the company. We say it a lot. So all of our if you include all of our values, it's integrity, compassion, excellence, and discipline. And they're introduced to new employees and reintroduced with regularity in a variety of different ways, including videos and company newsletters. And that's how they're communicated, but they're embraced in the actions of the company with a focus on metrics, a focus on accountability for delivering projects, and a focus on the beneficiaries of our services.
So list them again. And these existed before you got there, right?
They existed before I got here. Yes, integrity, compassion, excellence, and discipline.
It sounds like a bunch of doctors got together and decided. and I have to laugh because this is just me sort of thinking about it. How do you get from there to sort of inspiration? How do we get from there to actionable values that affect behavior, right? Because those are words on a page and they're very common words. And so, but you started to list some of those things. In fairness, I'm not sort of dinging your predecessors for picking those. I mean, they're good. They're very important and they're good words. They're not differentiating. And they're not exclusive. So the question, I guess, is how do you make them your own? How do they become part of the fabric and as a new person to the company, they must have sort of found ways to bring you into that culture.
Right. Well, it's interesting because if you listen in on conversations at every level of the organization, it really doesn't matter who you talk to, you will almost near 100% certainty hear the word patient or patient focused or someone talking about the patient. We don't have patients. Our customers don't have patients, but patients are the beneficiaries of our services. And we are very patient focused and very patient driven. And really, that's what the focus is all about. And integrity and compassion, excellence, and discipline are things that are required in order to be patient focused. So it might come across as a little dry, maybe not as dry as gin, but
depends on the gin, I think.
Yeah, I guess it may come across as a little dry the way I'm saying it, but every day we are really talking about patients. We're talking about helping them get the therapies they need faster, sooner, better, more effectively. And that is really how we embrace our values.
So what kinds of things does the company do that in your mind have really helped build the culture in the absence of a physical space?
Well, interestingly enough, CareMetx was founded over 10 years ago with the intention of creating a remote or virtual organization. So when the pandemic began, CareMetx was ready for it and had already given some thought to culture in a remote environment. Some of the programs that were implemented are all still in place, like Mindfulness Monday, where employees can join guided meditation session. Trivia Tuesday, employees can join after hours trivia night. That's fun and engaging. If you pop in, you'll hear people talking and chatting and socializing with each other and laughing. We have Feel Good Friday. We have a social impact day off. Employees can take the day off to do something good for their community. A diversity, equity, and inclusion program, the metrics of which are monitored all the way up to the board level. It's not really a program. This is a way of life for CareMetx. It is about creating an environment where every employee can be seen and feel heard. We belong to an organization that shares common values, but before you can embrace and embody the values, you must feel that sense of belonging. And DEI is not a moment in time thing. It's helping all employees achieve and reach their full potential. And that's a forever thing for a purpose-driven company like CareMetx. We have weekly newsletters, and there's a lot of other cultural support activities that we engage in over the course of the year.
And that's interesting, really interesting that your company was sort of thinking virtual long before every company was forced to think virtual. I wonder if, the Monday, the trivia nights, those things have sort of carried through. It's funny, we have a group of friends that we did for a while. It was every week, and then it was every other week and so forth. And we kind of stopped some of that. And then the same thing at Renegade, I noticed we used to have 2 coffee breaks. Now we have 1. We got enough. And part of it is just we're so virtualed out. I'm wondering if those things are still working.
People are attending them. They're participating in them. I'm sure over time, some of the attendance has waned over time, but some of those programs are predated the pandemic and will last long after the pandemic. Our DEI program is not, like I said, it's not a moment in time. Everybody has to feel like they belong to the organization for the values to mean anything anyway. That's a forever thing.
And so now I'm thinking about this. You inherited those. You haven't needed to adjust those. Do you see culture building as part of your domain, or you're happy that it's there, it's where it is at, and you need to focus on demand generation?
There's no way to separate what you do every day from the culture of the company. It's important in terms of managing your team and making them a productive part of the organization. So culture and how you manifest that for your team can have profound impacts on their productivity, development, and engagement. I don't see them as separate things. I inherited them, but we embrace them. And it's hard. It's not hard to get behind a purpose-driven company that's in the end, about helping people get therapies that they need to have a shot at a healthy existence. In some cases, it's life-saving.
Yeah. And again, sort of the interconnectedness of all of this from purpose and values to recruiting and retention in this time is not to be underestimated. Okay, I'm going to switch gears here, and I'm going to plug CMO Huddles. So we'll be back with you, Julie, in a second. So CMO Huddles was launched in 2020. It's an invitation-only subscription service that brings together an elite group of CMOs to share, care, and dare each other to greatness. One CMO describes huddles as timely conversations with smart peers in a trusted environment, while another called it a cross between an expert workshop and a therapy session. Now, we just happen to have 3 huddlers here today. And so while you're here, Mandy, Bhaskar, Julie, if you want to share your experience so far with huddles, I'd love to hear from you.
I can go first because I'm most likely one of the newest members over here. So I was introduced to Huddles by, one of our CMO for customers, precisely Kevin, Drew. It's been maybe a couple of weeks since I've joined CMO Huddles, and it's been great. Apart from participating in events like this, just listening to the various huddles, participating in that, just having everyone, means all of my peers next to me and learning from them. It's just been amazing. In fact, I was exchanging LinkedIn messages with Mandy the other day that how come we never met previously? We are in the same space. So it's just great. So I would highly recommend to everyone to come and join this.
I love that. As I'm thinking about your values of getting 1% better every day, certainly that's part of the Huddles program. Julie, Mandy, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I was introduced to Huddles, Drew, through you. Thank you. I'm one of the founding members, and I take that really seriously. It's been incredible, the connections I've made with other CMOs. And I think kind of the biggest aha for me personally was I'm not alone, right? Our jobs are big, and they're scary things that have huge impacts on the businesses that we're a part of. And, for me, it's always, am I doing this right? And sometimes we can't ask that question internally. But when you have this peer group that are there to support you or validate, it's just very rewarding. It helps me sleep better at night, and I get smarter every time I talk to my fellow CMOs. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Sleep better at night. That's amazing. Julie, while you're here, any comments?
Yeah, I have very fond feelings for CMO huddles. I have learned a lot from I consider everybody on huddles my external colleagues. They're really smart. I get to learn a lot faster than I would on my own. One of the things that's really important for me is like when you learn about your job, sometimes it's a little academic, but when you learn in huddles, it's for the moment. You're learning something that you're going to be able to implement or use right away that makes you better, faster now, not just in the future.
So there you had it. If you're a CMO who you think you can share, care, and dare with these three, check out cmohuddles.com, and we'd love to we'll at least talk to you about huddles. Anyway, we've been talking about this intersection of marketing leadership and company leadership and the corresponding intersection of marketing and culture. Let's shed some light on why this is such an important consideration for CMOs right now. And I tried to get at this earlier and y'all called me out on it, but how does a CMO who's thinking about, I'm being measured by demand generation, step back for a moment and say, you know what, you got to think bigger? And just talk a little bit about this intersection of marketing leadership, company leadership, and culture. Mandy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like we're being looked at differently. And, I think about myself in my own personal kind of consumer life. Like, what brands do I interact with? I respect the brand. I respect what they stand for. And that's where I put my dollars, right? And the converse is true for us as B2B marketers, right? We are custodians of, and keepers of the brand. And so how do you take all the goodness that's happening within the company and be able to go share that with the market so they understand what you stand for? And so I think that's what's happened as far as our consumer conscience. And I talk about this a lot, the consumerization of B2B, right? We are the same human. And so that is one of our North Stars as consumers and as B2B buyers. So you want to be associated with companies that are working with your peer set, that have, pedigree, have leadership in analyst communities as it relates to, the B2B world, but you want to be affiliated with them the brightest. And so how do you go share that? And how do you shine a light on your customers, your partners, your employees in that vein? So it all matters.
And so I get the big picture, and then I'm going to go over to Bhaskar and I just ask, values are something in my mind that you always sort of live. If you talk about them too much, it becomes, you're just preaching a little bit too loud. And I'm wondering again, what's the through line here from values? And Mandy talks about, okay, we need to be purpose driven. We need to be human because we're dealing with humans. But how do we get from these values to marketing and messaging and communications?
Yeah, so I'll kind of echo what Mandy said. A key part of this is even in B2B, at the end of the day, people do business with people. It's not with companies or anything like that. People who you relate to, people who you believe in, are people who actually are who you can say that, yeah, these are good folks. And those are the reasons why I want to do business with you. People do business with people. And I think there's an old saying as well, which is people buy emotionally and then justify rationally. So when you look at from that particular part of it, who you are and who you are as a person and as a company matters a lot in terms of how people buy from you. Whether it be demand gen or anything like that, being authentic and being able to actually portray that at the end of the day, we are here for you to be successful than us matters a lot. And I think that's what we at least like to portray to our customers, that, hey, we are here actually to help you. And we are just the guides. You are the heroes in this journey.
Yeah, and as I hear you talk, I think about all the energy that's going out right now into sort of micro messaging, persona based, both sales and marketing messaging. And I don't see values in a lot of that work. I don't see the values coming through in the emails or the sales calls or the LinkedIn outreach that I'm getting. So there's a disconnect. Either you folks are enlightened and the rest of the marketing world is unenlightened, or there's some things going on here that I'm missing because I don't see enough of what you're talking about.
There are a few things that we started, just to amplify that particular part of it. If you go to our LinkedIn profile and if you look at it, there are things that we have started talking about, which is what we are calling humans of Workato. And our customers are humans. So we are highlighting them. And this is individually as employees as to what they have done, what does that look like. And you'll see as a part of that as well, what we are calling human interest stories is our customer stories. We are highlighting about them. What happened with them? How did they get promoted? What are the things that they did? And Workato is just something on the side, right? In the sense it may or may not have helped achieve what they did, but we are highlighting our champions as who they are as individuals. And that's a core part of our marketing that we do. So it is not about what we are saying, hey, this is Workato, this is what we do. It is more about, hey, these are our customers and they're becoming successful. And here is our champion, he got promoted, etc. We played a small part in it, and we are happy to play that part in it.
It all makes sense. And I hope a lot of people are listening to this because these are highly successful companies that are growing based on taking their values and expressing them through all their other activities. So Julie, let's get specific. What's the best thing your company did in the last 12 months related to culture, or more specifically to wellness? Because we did promise we would at least touch on wellness in this conversation.
I mean, I think maybe by accident or on purpose, but the COVID-inspired remote work enabled an awful lot of people to trade their commute for workout time or family time. So in terms of wellness, that's pretty important. Wellness for me personally is really, really important. It is a core personal value of my own. So I think what's most important, at least for me, is the truth of the matter is that the single greatest impact I can have on the health and wellness of the employees that work with me and work in the broader organization is to do no harm. Excessive stress and toxicity has a way of multiplying beyond what we can reasonably control and manage. So become a better leader. That's not easy. It's not simple. And we're always learning, but bad leaders harm the health and the wellness of their staff. And that is very related to culture. Number two, you don't know everybody's health situation or triggers. So you have to listen up and applaud when you hear them and observe them taking healthy actions on their own behalf. So for me, that's personally my own personal value, in addition to the company, as I mentioned earlier in the show, having a variety of health related activities that they support.
Got it. Okay. Well, this is the moment in the show where we would say, what would Ben Franklin say? What he would say, as a man who looked forward to the future, can anything be constant in a world which is eternally changing? And so I think if there's one takeaway in all of this that we've been talking about so far, is that you do need to sort of be thinking about these things and adapting them just a little bit as the world changes. All right. Are you all sort of measuring culture? And if so, how?
I mean, we don't have a specific culture measure, but the best proxy we can find is retention. So retention seems to be pretty good at measuring whether you have a healthy culture. And our retention is pretty high, around 94%.
That's particularly impressive right now in the middle of this great resignation or reshuffling, as some call it. And I think that's really hard because now we're looking at a case where an employee is getting $50,000 offers for a lateral move. That's a big test of culture. I don't know how many cultures will survive that. But Mandy, Bhaskar, are you measuring culture?
Not in the way that, Julie, you're measuring, but we look at what outcomes are we getting from the operating values we have. And, yes, culture may play a role in it. There are multiple variables in that. To give an example, we talked about, customers are number 1, 2, and 3. And we have a CSAT, which is 96%. Our NPS is 79. So we are doing something right over there, right? So those are the things that we look at. So very similar to Drew, what you started talking about. Recently, one of the large enterprises switched all their automation and the platform to Workato. And the reason they said is one of the reasons. There were multiple reasons. One of the reasons was we are aligned as a culture. And so when you look at those things, you say that, okay, we are doing something right over here, which is resulting in certain kind of outcomes. So we look at those outcomes and correlate that to, did that, was the CSAT part a part of the customers, what we have? Customer is number 1, 2, and 3. Get 1% better every day. We can actually look at that to see, are we learning? Are we growing? Are we really disseminating that information? How transparent are we? These are some of the outcomes you look at, which we can correlate back to the culture, but not very specifically certain specific metrics like you were discussing.
Mandy, I'm wondering, I'm going to throw this one at you. In a huddle, the question came up, salespeople are rewarded based on sales, right? And marketing people are often rewarded for their contribution to, say, opportunities, and they may be even rewarded on closed deals. That puts all the emphasis on is the business results that in theory come through the culture. But as far as I know, no one in marketing is getting bonuses if aspects of the culture improve. And so if you're not compensating anybody for that, and maybe I'm missing something here, so help me understand, how do we inculcate and make sure that people are behaving according to culture? And I'll give, the classic example is the sales guy who sells more than anybody else, but everybody hates. How do you think about the through line from culture and values to compensation?
That's a great question, Drew. I think, the way we do it at Boomi, slightly nuanced. You mentioned earlier the superstar sales guys that everybody hates. We embrace our team success. I think that's something that sets us apart, and also our customer success, right? And at the end of the day, when we succeed as a business, we all succeed as individuals. So that is an inherent part of the culture. So I think we've done something different than you may see in other companies, is my suspicion, because at the end of the day, if the company results are hitting the targets, the culture is driving that.
And so then the next question is, so how do you, we got revenue targets, which are going to be based on, upsell, cross-sell of existing customers, retention, and of course, net new logos. And this is, we were talking a little bit about how you measure the impact of that. How do you put an impact and a value on everybody is delivering against the values that we prize at this organization?
Another great question. I think if you architect it correctly, you'll know when it's working. From where I sit in the organization, what I see, I'll give you a tangible example. We have a customer, Moderna, that came out during the pandemic and was a strong customer reference for us. And the CIO talked about how he and his team go Boomi it in other parts of their business so they can be successful in terms of their race to go find a cure for the COVID pandemic. And so what happened was we took what the customer was saying, we brought it back internally, and there was deep resonance around go Boomi it. And so now all of a sudden it's become this rally cry for the organization. And what is that driving? At the end of the day, it means go win for that customer, go create awesome things, build trust, play for each other. I know it's working when I see it. I'll log on to LinkedIn or Twitter, and all of a sudden I've got one of our 1,400 employees out there evangelizing the Go Boomi hashtag. It's also going external now, right? And so all of a sudden it starts to ignite a movement, but it's founded on those cultural values. And ultimately, yes, it drives the business and it drives the growth. It drives more inbound in for as far as employee referrals. So it's not cut and dry, but when you do it right, it's additive.
Okay, amazing. Julie, do you have a thought on this through line?
Well, you already mentioned it a little earlier. Your bonus is impacted by culture. If your environment is unproductive and inefficient and you're constantly dealing with turnover, it's going to be hard to earn your bonus that way. Culture is very much subject to that Red Queen effect. And as the Red Queen said to Alice, here we must run as fast as we can just to stay in the same place. And if you wish to go anywhere, you must run twice as fast as that. The culture needs to support all of those metrics. Anything you're measuring should be supported by the culture. And yes, there's going to be people who step out, but they need to be, managed carefully. If there's any genuine authenticity behind your culture.
Right. In theory, these values show up in employee evaluations and things like that. Bhaskar, final words of wisdom for your fellow marketers on how to build strong work cultures.
I think the main thing is just be completely authentic as to who you are and who you are as a company and what you stand for, and try to codify that. And from a culture building standpoint, like I was saying, it's everyone's responsibility. It's not just the leadership team. And once you have codified that in some way, put that to right from hiring principles all the way to how you onboard people. How do you really ensure that the culture is alive and people are doing something about it? So that entire thing takes time. But I think culture wins it overall. And if you have a great culture, and if you have something that other companies love, and you love being a part of that culture, you're just in a great environment. Something that you just like Julie, you were talking about retention rates, etc. Those things become just no-brainer at that point in time.
Amazing. Julie, last words of wisdom.
I think, culture is like many other things you really care about. You have to invest in it. It is, one of those investments in your business that acts as a multiplier. So the more you put into nurturing it and developing it and making sure you're genuine and authentic around how you behave related to your culture and your values, the greater the yield.
We've reached our time. I really want to thank you three, Mandy, Bhaskar, Julie. You're all amazing. Really enjoy speaking with you. And thank you, audience, for staying with us. I'm your host, Drew Neiser. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.